Inner Voice, a heartfelt chat with Dr. Foojan. Inner Voice, a heartfelt chat with Dr. Foojan.
Break free from the forces holding you back. Get the life you deserve. Eliminate stress, reduce anxiety, decrease depression, and start living your full potential. Thousands have used Dr. Foojan Zeine's awareness integration theory, an evidence-based behavioral health breakthrough with incredible life-changing results. Getting rid of past trauma, having fulfilling relationships, increasing earnings, and living their best life. Now, the Foojan app is available to everyone. The app is Dr. Foojan Zeine's awareness integration theory in the palm of your hand. Download the Foojan app today.
Do you wish to wake up one day and hit the Life Reset button? Life Reset, the awareness integration path to create the life you want by Dr. Foojan Zeine, helps you navigate crucial life areas, heal the past traumas, and cultivate fulfilling relationships and careers. Life Reset is your guide to a profound journey to reshape your life. Grab your copy on Amazon or Audible now and embark on a path to a more joyous and fulfilled life.
Welcome to the Inner Voice, a heartfelt chat with Dr. Foojan podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Foojan Zeine, a psychotherapist and the creator of the Awareness Integration Theory. I'm thrilled to have you join us today for what promises to be the insightful discussion. In this episode, I chat, and I'm so honored to chat with Dr. Kenneth Blum. He's a well-known American scientist, recognized for his work related to psychopharmacology and psychiatric genetics. Dr. Blum has published over 740 peer-reviewed articles, books, chapters, and meeting abstracts, and with 17 books with over 18,000 citations, 185,000 reads worldwide. He has distinguished himself and is credited with the first genetic association of the dopamine D2 receptor gene and severe alcoholism, published in JAMA in 1990. He's considered by some people to be the father of psychiatric genetics. In 1995, Dr. Blum coined the term reward deficiency syndrome and developed the USA and foreign patented genetic addiction risk severity cards test. Dr. Blum has also developed patented pro-dopamine regulators in the USA and Europe, and his overall patent portfolio consists of 100 patents worldwide. Dr. Blum serves on 23 peer-reviewed journals and is the editor-in-chief on a number of academic journals, including Current Psychopharmacology and Addiction Psychiatry. He also serves as associate editor for Frontiers in Psychiatry and Frontiers in Public Health. Dr. Blum is also the founding president of the United Scientific Group, an academic publishing house. His work has been featured in all major media outlets worldwide, and in 1990, his work on genetics was in the top 25 most important discoveries in science by Discovery magazine. He's the recipient of NIH grants and has been awarded Lifetime Achievements Distinguished Honorary Doctors of Humane Letters, Lifetime Honorary Professor at ELTE Eötvös Loránd University in Hungary, and Distinguished Honorary Professor at Adelson School of Medicine in Israel, in Ariel University, Israel. Currently, besides his faculty positions at adjunct professor at Western University and University of Vermont Wright School of Medicine, he is the executive chairman and the CEO of Transplice Gen Therapeutics. Stanford University credited him as top 2% of the world's best scientists list of 2023. Most recently, the International Research Awards on Neurology and Neurodisorders awarded him as Best Researcher Award in 2023. Dr. Blum has been recently nominated for the Keio Medical and Science Prize, the Japanese equivalent to the Nobel Prize 2024. I can't tell you how honored I am to be working and writing in some of the journals. I've learned so much from him. Even today, as I was talking to him, I kept learning new items, and it's just, he's a genius. And I hope that you enjoy the conversation always, as I have. Be sure to subscribe to this podcast, my YouTube channel, and connect with me through my website, foojanzeine.com, or any of my social media platforms. Share your thoughts with me. I'd love to hear from you. Now, without further ado, Dr. Kenneth.
Intentional Parenting, a practical guide to awareness integration theory, written by Dr. Jafari, Dr. Foojan Zeine, and Dr. Manoukian, 3 experts in human development, is your step-by-step guide to raising a healthy child prepared for a culturally integrated world. You're supported in parenting infants to adolescents using the latest evidence-based scientific research on parenting. Order your copy on Amazon now.
Eliminate stress, reduce anxiety, and decrease depression. Dr. Foojan Zeine's awareness integration theory has helped thousands like you get incredible life-changing results. The Foojan app gives you her evidence-based treatment in the palm of your hand. Download today.
I am so excited to have Dr. Kenneth Blum with us. I am honored. I have been so excited to have the opportunity to have worked with you, Dr. Blum, and have seen your brilliance. And I'm excited to have my group, my audience, to also have the privy to hear you, and with all of the new patents and the work that you've been doing. So welcome to the show.
It's my pleasure, Foojan. It's been great working with you.
Yes, we've done
and Nicole.
paper and on addiction. We're still working on one major paper on addiction, and one of the most important facts is the concept of pre-addiction, which you are introducing not only from a genetic perspective, but also when we understand the genetic perspective, instead of allowing the environment to express that gene in a way that we know it would lead up to the addiction and all of the suffering that the person and the family has to go through. When we have the ability to assess, we also will find the ability to cure or work with or change the environment or watch or do better parenting. There's so many other factors. The minute we actually do get that knowledge, plus all the other supplements and for treatment that there is, could you please share a little bit about the concept of pre-addiction?
Yeah, it'll be my pleasure. So the original concept of pre-addiction came about in the 70s. And I was just sort of let alone. People didn't get too excited about it, because in the 70s, we didn't really know much about the genetics or the epigenetics, which is the environment, effect onto gene expression. Then, actually, in 2022, I believe, there was a paper basically from the National Institutes of Drug Abuse with Noah Volker and the National Institutes of Alcoholism and Alcohol Abuse, George Koo, suggesting that the missing piece in understanding substance abuse is the idea of pre-addiction. Now, that concept of pre-addiction is not the same concept that I have, but the idea that they put the terminology out was pretty exciting, especially for myself and people that understand the biological aspects of it, okay, besides the environmental aspects. But the best way to explain it, Foojan, is that there's a simple mathematical formula, and that is that the phenotype, which could be pre-addiction, okay, is always equal to the genetics plus the environment. And we know now that it's 50-50. Okay, so the environment has a very strong input onto your DNA genetics. So you can be reborn with variations in the brain reward circuitry and the genes that control the brain reward circuitry. But the environment can actually impact it, either making it even worse or making it potentially better. So let me explain that to you a little bit more so that the audience can understand. What we have learned in the last 20 years is that the environment can actually affect the expression of genes for 2 to 3 generations later without really changing the DNA. And this might sound very strange, okay? But what happens is that on the chromosome, okay, there's these sugar molecules that stick up, called histones. And it's very interesting because we got positive like love and care, parenting, and good feelings to your children as they grow, or in society, as you know, to human beings. If it's positive, you get what we call acetylation onto the histone. Acetylation increases the expression of the genes that make you feel good, okay? But if it's negative, okay, and there's abuse and a whole long range of poor parenting skills, okay, and the loss of awareness of what's going on in their life, make it even worse, like your wonderful theories involving awareness integration, therapy, is an ideal situation where when you get the negative impact environmentally, guess what? You get methylation on the histones, and that shuts off the expression of RNA transcription and RNA expression for a whole variety of genes that allows you to feel good, all linked, by the way, to a substance called dopamine. And that is very important. Now, the reason why I could say this with some certainty is that we have done some tremendous work on the pharmacogenomics of addiction, and with millions of data bank samples, okay, what do we find? We found that pre-addiction phenotype is, guess what? Dopamine dysfunction. So we are very, very certain that one of the ways that could overcome pre-addiction is 2 things. One, you could potentially should be able to identify it even at birth, which sounds funny. And the second thing is that your target has to bring about dopamine stabilization. So how do we deal with the first part? The first part, we have also found from the pharmacogenomic evidence that a test that we developed called the Genetic Addiction Risk Severity Test, which measures 10 variants across the brain reward circuitry that affects the net release of dopamine at the reward site, which is called the nucleus accumbens. That test, based on the PGX evidence, can accurately predict pre-addiction. So there you go. We can actually predict it, and if you bring about dopamine stabilization, you may be able to assist in attenuating its devastating effects on the human.
And this can be done with children. So this could be part of even the pediatric assessments, right?
Yeah, see, not yet, because, it's pioneering work, and it's only 60 years that we're talking about this, but that's still not long enough in the scientific community to really accept it. But it's becoming more and more acceptable. And we're doing more and more research, and you're involved with this research as well, as you know, that will eventually get the naysayers to join the team and say, let's use this assessment, okay? And use it as a pediatric tool that can be used early on, especially in families that are at risk because the father, mother, or both have addictive liability. We could test it. We could test it in the family. We could test it in the children. We could look at the lineage, and we could see exactly the possibility of addiction liability. And not only that, it's like a mirror to the brain. We could look at 10 genes across the brain involved in the reward cascade and to release dopamine, and we could see exactly what DNA antecedents, what DNA problems and variants are not working. And we can also target those genes for the future. And that's the exciting part of it.
Is there a way that you've also seen in your work that there could be a possibility of, until we could go ahead and do the guards and do the assessment, is there also a possibility of watching a child's behavior and kind of assessing whether they already have a dopamine dysregulation because of maybe if it regulates itself, then maybe they do certain behavior and there's more of a balance in the behavior. And if it's a dysregulation, that they do more risky stuff, they do a little bit more extreme kind of behaviors in order to boost that. And then we see possibly the same group as they become a teenager, they go into alcohol and drugs because they're trying to induce more dopamine because their system doesn't produce it. Is that something you've seen?
Right. That's a perfect way of explaining it. Okay. So if you could imagine that if you have, for example, a DNA variation that in the synapse, just think about it, in the synapse, where dopamine is released, and there's an enzyme that eats it up too much, too fast, then you got lack of dopamine momentarily, every moment, low dopamine. Not only that, that person may also have another variation that reabsorbs the dopamine, right, from the pre-synapse, from the synapse back into the pre-neuron, and that's how it works. And what happens, and that's called the dopamine transporter system. What happens, you got a variation, which shows you that you have 4 times the greater reabsorption. Well, that's slow dopamine again. So we think that a lot of people are born with variations that bring about low dopamine in the brain. Now, if you have low dopamine in the brain, what are you going to do? You need dopamine for cognition, memory, motivation. You ever hear of the amotivational syndrome? Well, there's low dopamine. It's called hyperdopaminergia, okay? Enhanced seeking behavior, risky behavior, all of the things that you just expressed is due, in my opinion, to a hypo or low dopaminergic function at the reward center of the brain. And if you have that, then you're going to be looking for ways to cure the itch. You're going to be looking for ways to get more dopamine. Well, how do you get dopamine released more? Well, think about it. Alcohol releases dopamine acutely. Cannabis does. Nicotine does. Cocaine, opiates, all your drugs. Behaviors, gambling, shopping, all these things, sex, all these things give you a tremendous release of dopamine. So that's why, I'll give you one example. This is a paper done by my friend David Cummings some years ago, after we found the first gene code alcoholism, which is the addiction gene, which is the dopamine to receptor A1 form of that gene, which is 40% low T2 receptors, which I'll talk about maybe later. But the point is that what he found was that teenagers that carried the DRD2A1 allele or variant, guess what? As an early onset of sexual intercourse. So all of this is fitting in with the notion that people, young or old, seek out dopamine to make them feel better.
So when that's understandable, and then the other side of it is, how do we balance it, right? Because in order to have a balanced life, we also have to have enough dopamine, but not too much dopamine. So there's like this concept of balancing it, that there's because it's not balanced, we keep moving toward some behavior in order to create it. The part is that it's not like, okay, I'm hungry, I'm going to eat, and it's done. Part of the issue, which becomes dysregulated, it's not like, okay, I need dopamine, I'll do a behavior and I'm done. It keeps asking for more and more and more. And that's where the concept of addiction comes, because it's never enough. If it was just, I'm hungry, I eat, I'm done, until the next time I'm hungry. But the next time that it needs another surge, that's the issue of the addiction, which it's seeking for something which it just seems like it's never enough, and it goes beyond health, because then it reduces the practical concept of what a person naturally can offer a dopamine, and then the person is seeking for something outside of them, but then it's not enough, so they keep adding more. In this concept, coming back to regulating it, you have had suggestions. One has been there's supplements that it gives in order to regulate it, so you don't have always this hunger for it. And another aspect has been that you're suggesting that most of the treatments out there at this point, they're introducing some substance that adds to this issue versus regulate this concept, right? So, for example, you said like it's giving alcohol to an alcoholic, hoping that at one point it would regulate it. You know, we're giving narcotics to people with opioid addiction in hope that it would regulate it. And your suggestion is it might be that it's fine that we do this as an interim into health, but it cannot be the only concept, because it would never actually regulate it. It would always feed the beast.
Well, that was a very good way of explaining it. However, let me add to that, okay? Number one, the standard of care, as you pointed out, in the United States, and potentially around the world, if you're an opioid addict, what do they give you? They give you Suboxone or buprenorphine and naloxone, okay, or naltrexone. And what's the problem with that? Well, the problem with that is that we have shown from studies with a true lie detector, okay, that the people that take these heavy, powerful opioids, day in and day out, as methadone or buprenorphine, their effect is completely gone. Okay, they don't have an effect, so their emotionality is stunted. Okay. Secondly, we know that by giving an opioid constantly, what do? You downregulate the opioid receptor. If you downregulate the opioid receptor, it prevents the release of dopamine that you need to feel good. You get depression. Okay, man, you get anxiety. Okay, and that is my opinion, a major problem, because you could argue all day long that the reason why we can give an opiate for an opiate-dependent individual is we're going to get harm reduction. We're going to give them the opiate. Maybe they won't go on the street and get heroin and die from fentanyl. But we're going to give them this controlled opioid. And then what happens is insurance goes away. You lock them into addiction. Then they go on the street, get out and die. Why is it that if that's such a great treatment, Foojan, why is it that we have over 100,000 people dying every year from opiate abuse or use, okay? That's not good. Why is it that we got suicide ideation up when you get opioids? All of that, because you're not getting dopamine release. That could cause depression, right? So this is not, in my opinion, a way to balance the dopaminergic system, which, by the way, is involved in about there's 7 neurotransmitter systems: serotonin, endorphins, GABA, and acetylcholine. It's not just dopamine, but it's the cascade that leads to the release of dopamine. That's the finite step in reward. There's nothing else that we know. Now, okay? So if we want to balance the transmitters that are involved in dopamine release, we got to bring about what we call dopamine homeostasis, which is dopamine balance. How do we do it? What do we know about this? Well, I could say this much, that from the 70s, we learned early on that if you raise the levels of endorphins, or particularly something called methamphetamine, you reduce, for example, alcohol intake or drug intake, okay? So we developed a way that we could do that. It's a substance called D-phenylalanine, which inhibits an enzyme which cuts up peptides, which will destroy the effect of the endorphins in the brain. But that was only one thing. So we developed a very selective amino acid encapsulase inhibition supplement, which we call KB220. And people can look it up. And we have now 35 clinical trials on the substance. But guess what? We even show with scan and imaging and neuroimaging that we actually balance the brain following, say, heroin abstinence, psychostimulant abstinence, alcohol abstinence. So we actually bring about balance of dopamine in the brain. What we're talking about, teenagers, for example, they could be born with low dopamine based on the DNA, okay? But as they develop and they get into the environment, they may get an increased dopamine. And when they use drugs, for them, it's a heightened effect, because they got too much quanta of dopamine coming out. And that's new development. But what we're saying is that can we bring that hyperdopamine down? And can we bring the hypodopamine up to some kind of asymptotic normalization of dopamine? And we show that with the KB220.
Which brings the person in so many levels, whether they're a child or a teenager, prior to getting themselves into some substance that falsifies and brings a dopamine. If we do that with the GARS assessment or their behavior, we could see, and that could support them never to get there, because they're already learning how to regulate and bring their dopamine, either up it or down it, and to bring it into homeostasis. Or if someone has already tried some of these drugs and they are have become dependent on it, that if they can get treated with this, at least they'll have the system come back into some homeostasis.
Well, the problem is that some of the drugs including what I can tell you this: alcohol, cocaine, morphine, nicotine, all these drugs, what do? Acutely, they release dopamine, okay? Chronically, they downregulate dopamine, and you get less dopamine. So if they're using these abusable drugs first to get the high, okay, to get dopamine release, it's like they're always chasing that ghost, and they never get there because they're getting down regulation, making it worse. So it's a pseudo high in a sense. And they don't really, and they keep using and using and using to get it because they're chasing that high and they don't get there. Okay. And that is one of the problems. And if we give an opiate to an opiate dependent person, it's like giving alcohol to an alcoholic. You know what I'm saying? Like you said. So we need to find a way where we get a side effect free, safe way of balancing dopamine. Now let me go a little bit further. Okay, you can use this KB220, but think about it. Once you get that brain balanced, then you can start applying psychological and behavioral tools that could help them in the future. For example, your awareness integration therapy. I mean, get the brain balanced. Now they can understand what you're talking about, Foojan, and then that can help them tremendously. Same thing with parenting. Start talking to the parents, like you and Nicole Jafari put out in your book. Start dealing with the root of the problem. Okay, now parent may have DNA genetics that lead to pre-addiction, right? And then you're born with that. Okay, that doesn't mean you have to end up being an addictive person, but it's a high liability. We did a Bayesian theorem in which we looked for the pre-addiction value. If you carry the DRD2A1 allele, just that gene alone, guess what the predictive value is? That you have a whole list of potential, we call it reward deficiency syndrome behaviors, which includes, drugs, alcohol, and non-substance abuse behaviors, like gambling, sex addiction, everything else, at 74.4%. So that if you're born with this DNA antecedent, which could be one of, say, 10 or more genes, you are going to be set up to have a liability to have pre-addiction. And potentially, if you start using, you can't get out of it so fast. So this is the problem, okay, that we see with so many people, having the DNA antecedent, top of it, environmental epigenetics, insult. It's a double whammy. And we just showed that in a beautiful paper that we're producing on the epigenomics of all of this. It's a very interesting paper. You're on it with Nicole and others that is explaining that not only do we have to worry about the DNA antecedents, we got to worry about the epigenetic insults based on poor parenting and negative in the environment to cause these epigenetic insults, which downregulate these genes that we need to feel good.
Now, in one of your research, you've also found so many percentage of the people across the globe having this type of DNA with the alcoholic gene. Can you share a little bit about that research?
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. Okay, so the DRD2A1 allele, when Ernie Noble and I discovered that to associate with severe alcoholism, published in JAMA in 1990. Well, we told the world that when we looked at alcoholic tissue, brain tissue, compared to non-alcoholic brain tissue, we found that 79% of the people that had alcohol tissue had this form of the gene. Now, when we look at population genetics, okay, what we also saw is that 1/3 of the American population, 100 million people in America, carry this form of the gene. That's why there's so much addiction going on in America, for sure. America uses more opiates than any other country. Now, I'm not saying other countries don't have it, they do. But to make things even worse, when we start looking at the percentages of people that we look at the GOS test, you know, that genetic test that I talked about, right? When we looked at 4,000 Americans, guess how many people had risk for addiction? Over 90%.
90%, wow.
Crazy. It's crazy. That's why we live in such an addictive, community. And that's a big problem.
What do you think about the evolutionary perspective? If it's in our genes and 90% of, for example, Americans have it, and 70% of across the world, what have you found from an evolutionary adaptation concept of how come we have that gene? I had one article which had said that because man was eating fruits and fermented fruits off of the whether wine or the trees, that there has been the fermented fruit concept is something that the body needed to digest and know and learn and how to do that. What is your perspective on the concept of the genes being so prevalent with all of this for so many years?
Well, we go back millions and millions and millions of years. Darwin had an interesting concept: survival of the fittest. Okay, and if you read some of Darwin's work, one of the things he says is that don't think, and he used the word man, today we use people, but he says man is not noble and was not noble. And the Homo sapiens was not noble. So if you're out there and you're eating a bone, someone's going to smack you in the head and take your bone away. You're not going to give it to them. You know what I mean? Because we're selfish. That's the selfish gene. Now, I've always called it the sympathin gene. I always thought that might have been the DRD2 gene, for example, the A1 variant. And the A1 variant, you got low dopamine receptors, which is a no-go, which means the filter is gone. Okay? Now, why do you want the filter gone? Well, if you're a cave person, you don't want to be so noble, you know what I mean? And you're going to go out and you're going to get the food to the family, and you're going to be a hunter-gatherer, okay? And the people that are hunter-gathering, usually the men, go out and become hunter-gatherers, and they bring back stuff, okay? And that gene form, that variant that has low dopamine receptors, up to 40% in some cases, is a survival gene. It's competitive, okay? We even looked at people that play sports, they got a high percentage got that, okay? And I'll give you one, I don't know how much time I got, but I'll give you one quick, interesting paper that I did. I don't know if I ever sent it to you, but the Holocaust. Okay, what was going on in the Holocaust? The Germans had 48% of the Germans carried that A1 allele. The Ashkenazi Jews in Germany, guess what they carried it at? 6%. So the fighting of human and the competitive kind of human carried A1 allele of evolution, okay, to survive. And therefore they crushed and crumbled the Jews, and who basically didn't know what was going on. They were not fighting. They were reading books and selling stuff, making money, which was not good for them. Hitler didn't like that for crazy reasons. The point is that those people that left and went out in 1948 and went to Israel, that got out of the Holocaust. My question is, they carried the A1 allele. And I went to Israel and I met with a general, and he had a club of 300 survivors of the Holocaust. All I wanted to do is genotype. And he said, no. I said, why? Because we think it's luck. And I never was able to do it. Guess what? When you look at the Israeli community right now, guess what? 40% carry A1 out there. That's what's going on in Israel. They are now surviving, whether it's right or wrong. They're not, you know what I mean? They're not the same kind of human because of that particular evolutionary adaptation, only because they got out, in my opinion. I don't know if that makes sense to you.
Absolutely. And then tying that with the addiction across the world. I mean, obviously we have a crisis here, but addiction is something that has been there forever and in different forms. And if you saw the addiction as an adaptive concept, you know, with the genetic concept, how would you propose addiction being an adaptive evolutionary concept for us? Is that part of what you're saying? Is that also another survival game that we've had? Or is it more that we give up with the survival and we get attached to some things? How do you see the concept of attachment and that attachment to drugs or addiction from that perspective?
Well, it's a pretty difficult question to answer, but let me say this. There's a new piece of work that we're just doing, okay? You don't know about yet. And we have looked at the sex chromosomes, the X and the Y, okay? So males got XY, females got XX, they haven't got Y, okay? And guess what we found with the pharmacogenomic analysis? It's amazing. You know that there's a lot of data to suggest that males have an increased liability for addictive-like behavior, okay? More than females. But females, for example, once they get into it, they have a hard time getting out of it, okay? And what we have found is that the Y chromosome links into risky behavior. And the X chromosome links into nurture and love and caring, okay? And that distinction, okay, gives us a little bit of an understanding, okay, of what's going on, even in terms of male and female, and, you know, the Mars and Venus concept, okay? Leads to differential, how can I say, states and traits for addiction liability, okay? Now, is addiction something that we want for survival? I don't think so, but we have to realize that that's what we got. And we have to embrace it. And we have to work with it. And we have to find ways to assist the issue and not just ignore it. We have to remove the stigma. We have to get rid of all of that stigmatization. Because what is addiction? In my opinion, it's just a molecular rearrangement of some of the nucleotides and genes.
We lost your voice. Can you
DNA anti-seed.
Yeah, say that again? Because when you came forward, we lost your
Oh, I'm
voice.
sorry.
Can you say it again?
That addiction to me is really basically a molecular rearrangement, okay, of genes, okay, that affect the nucleotides that bring about a DNA antecedent for pre-addiction, which, by the way, we call reward deficiency syndrome, which has a whole host of these behaviors, okay, and environmental epigenetic insults, okay, and that is survival evolutionary in terms of where we're at in the world. So we have to remove the stigma, and we have to work with people. And people got to realize that they can't feel bad because they get involved in this. It's like any disease. You should not feel bad because you got diabetes. That came about because of either environmental impact or genetic. Same thing with addiction.
You know, I learned so much from you. I just can like gobble up all the information. I hate to let you go, but we got a couple more minutes, and I really wanted to ask you, is there anything in this subject? And I know I took you to other places with it because it's just so exciting. I want to hear everything that you know. Anything we haven't said that you want everybody to know for this episode? And I'm hoping that you'll keep joining me and we could explore different angles. But with the conversation of pre-addiction, is there anything that you want to share that we haven't shared yet and you want everybody to know as we close in?
Well, I think it could be a little selfish, okay? But I think what's important, and we just gave some talks at the Brain Mapping Society, and Curtis Sunder was the chairperson of two out of my 3 talks. And what he said was this: look, he said, yeah, we have a test called GAUSE, that why can't we use GAUSE to out the industry? Why can't we use GAUSE on birth? Why can't we identify this disease early on, like you could do with many other diseases? That's what they do with with diabetes. So what my frustration is, how do we keep going by giving opiates and locking people in addiction when we have something, lots of study? So why can't we use, people come in, they could do an RDS questionnaire, which has been validated and developed. They could do the GAUSE test, which could give them a genetic understanding of the DNA antecedents that could lead to customized ingredients for KB220, and we can bring about personalized therapeutics targeted and induced dopamine homeostasis.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think this needs to be there, not only with everybody's office, internists, psychiatrists, the primary cares, the pediatrician. And I think it's one of those tests that it needs to be there, accessible to all the clinicians and patients in order to have the ability to foresee and to be able to have the treatments. So it's not like, because it's your genetics, there's nothing we could do. It's actually the environment that can be shifted and some things can change. But if you don't know it, if you have no clue about it, obviously we can't change anything. So I hope that as soon as possible, this is taken seriously and to be given to the patients, have the ability, accessibility for the physicians and clinicians and the medical field to be able to offer this. So thank you for creating.
One more quick thing. I'll say real quick, okay? People have been arguing about what they call candidate gene approach, which is the GAUSE. Then they think about GWIS, which is thousands of genes. Well, you can't do a commercial test with that, okay? And when we do this PGM,
you need to move back because your voice goes away.
When we do this pharmacogenomics and GWIS, 88.8 million samples says that the GAUSE can accurately predict the addiction. So
beautiful. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us. And I hope that you keep joining us and giving us all that you do with so many research. And every day you're coming up with different research across the world. This is not just United States. You do research across the globe. So it is always fascinating and I always learn from you. So it's been an amazing to have you in my career life and to have met you. So I'm always very appreciative of you and you allowing your time for us.
My heart too. Thanks.
Thank you. And for all of you who are out there, create an amazing life for yourself and everyone around you. And until next week, bye-bye.
Are you a psychotherapist looking to enhance your practice? The Awareness Integration Therapy developed by Dr. Foojan Zeine is a comprehensive guide to the principle and techniques of this powerful therapeutic approach. Join the growing community who have elevated their practice and expanded their skills by embracing Awareness Integration Therapy and witnessing its life-changing impact. Order your copy on Amazon now.